Burke's on his feet. He looks up and gives me a grin and says, "Hey dude, you too must be from Marin." Marin County's A-OK, from Tam to Stinson all the way to MA. Fresh organic veggies in the market every day. The Dennis, Dylan, and NW.
Welcome to the Run TMC podcast. That is the Run, the Marin County podcast, a podcast about the wonderful sport of basketball based in the wondrous county of Marin County, California. I'm Duffy Ballard. This is season 3, episode 8 of the podcast. And with me today, as always, is co-host, a man of great verbosity, David Levine. How are you this morning, Dave?
I'm trying to think of a good vocab word. Is verbosity a word?
It is. It is. Yeah. Okay. I just looked it up moments ago.
Look at you. So one thing that I'm happy about, Duff, is that you didn't use the word lovely in describing Marin County or basketball, because I feel like we've been abusing the word lovely, both of us. So you went with wondrous today, which is, I think, a really nice choice. Really, really good.
Yeah, we've been glazing lovely a little bit, so try to keep it low key with wondrous.
There you go.
And now it's time for you to make a 6-7 reference, Dave. You know, coaching these high schoolers it's a challenge. It's like learning a whole new language.
I dropped a flow state reference to my team the other day. That's a big thing now with the kids on TikTok, the high schoolers. So it was met with a vigorous eye roll. But we have a awesome episode today. So awesome, actually, Duff, that we decided we're going to be very limited in our pre-interview banter today. We'll do a very efficient intro here. Got a few things to cover, but then we want to get right to this interview with Coach Bryan Rooney, who's fantastic. And then we're bringing back the outro. So after the interview, stick around and we'll share some thoughts on Coach Rooney, because he had so many insightful things to say, and we just thought we'd get to the interview quicker. So that's the plan.
Right. I have a couple questions for you, Dave, in this intro. But first, I want to share a shout out to Caden Haney on the Marin Catholic team. He's been out with a knee injury. He's been running the scoreboard for us some of the time, along with his buddy Joseph, and they are remarkably good at stopping the clock at 6.7 seconds.
Wow. 6-7.
6-7. Okay. First question, Dave, is I was not really paying attention to the NBA standings all that much. You know, I knew the Thunder were doing well, and I knew Detroit was off to a great start. The Warriors were kind of in the middle, but I looked, and the Clippers are 6-18. Why are they so bad?
I was surprised at this as well. The Clippers have plenty of talent. It seems like they are, well, first of all, team culture is bad. The vibes are bad. You know, Tyronn Lue, people seem to love Tyronn Lue. He's had a great career. He's won titles with the Cavs. He was a player himself, but somehow he's lost that team. So they're not happy. I think Lawrence Frank, right? Isn't he involved in the front office? It just seems like the culture's kind of struggling. And then you've got aging roster, older players, you've had injuries, and just no chemistry. So look, James Harden is a polarizing figure. I mean, Harden is a extraordinarily talented guy, obviously a great scorer, but he's never won a title, and I don't think he ever will, unfortunately, just because I don't think he's a unifier. You know, when we had Jonas Honeck in our last roundtable, he was discussing how Wembanyama and Jokic are inclusive and kind of come into my world, as Jonas said, and Steph is that kind of guy. I don't think Harden is that kind of a leader. And so this team just has this vacuum where they don't really have team leadership. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I mean, I can't say that I've been watching the Clippers, but I look at their roster and look at the recent past, and the recent past being like the last 5 years with Kawhi Leonard and his unpredictability in terms of being available. And maybe even though he has won titles, maybe he has fallen into that Harden category of not being particularly inclusive. And then they're trying to mix in some veterans, Brooke Lopez and Collins, and Beal, and the fit hasn't been great. Now, maybe they could turn it around. Who knows? But to harken back to our last episode, Dave, they don't seem to have an us story that has coalesced, at least not yet. And I know that, Tyrone Lue, like that is one of his major superpowers as a coach, at least, with the Cavs, and why LeBron was such a big fan was being able to create that, with a bunch of highly paid NBA stars with very healthy egos. So maybe they pull it together, but it's not looking good for the Clippers right now.
The balance of an NBA locker room is, I've always been astonished at how these guys sustain that season. I mean, the length of time that they play, the number of games that they play, it's just staggering. And you're on planes constantly, you're in hotels, you're with each other, and the teams that really genuinely have that connection, great callback to belonging and the us story. The great Warriors teams had that, where you'd hear stories that they would go out to dinner as a group on the road, and it's just very inclusive, and that informs their performance on the floor. And the teams that are kind of more isolated and siloed, they don't seem to be as successful. So really interesting. I mean, the Pistons continue to be great. If you have a chance to watch the Pistons play, do it. They are really interesting to watch. They're extremely physical. They're really good. Oklahoma City is 23-1, Duff. I mean, they are, obviously that pace is insane, but they very well could, if they wanted to, try to break the Warriors' regular season record. Now, remember, the year the Warriors set that record, they did not win the title. They lost to the Cavs in the finals.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they sacrificed a bit trying to win 70 whatever games, and it came back to bite them. But Oklahoma City, just so good. They've got the superstar with Shea, and then an incredible supporting cast.
Yeah, I mean, the strategy obviously has worked there. You get a young core, and then you build them over a few years. You take some hard knocks, you get over the edge, and then you have a young core that they've played together for a few years, and they're all going to peak at the same time, more or less. So yeah, they're going to be really tough. Even if they have a couple injuries, there's probably only one guy on that team that if he goes out, then they're no longer the favorite. Any of the other guys, and we've seen like Jalen Williams has been out, and they're still winning games. So, and Dave, one comment on the go find a Detroit game. That is if you can figure out the television schedule for the NBA this year. I mean, you have to go to like Netflix on Mondays between 4 and 7, and on Tuesdays between 8 and 11, it's Disney. And then ESPN Triple Plus is Wednesdays between 9 a.m. and 9 p.m. I don't know. I don't have it figured out yet, Dave.
I'm not even going to try.
Okay, question number 2. So I know you have plans coming up very soon on December 20th, but I assume you do. But what are your plans for an even more important day, December 21st, World Basketball Day?
December 20th is my birthday. We won't talk about that. December 21st, World Basketball Day. Shout out to our friend David Hollander. How basketball can save the world. He spearheaded this effort to have World Basketball Day on December 21st. I believe, if memory serves, that is a Saturday. Is that correct? I'm doing math. I think that is.
Yes.
I will probably have practice in the morning. We don't have a game that day. I will enjoy that, and then I will spend some time with my family. I'll get a workout in, and then I will, every spare moment, Duffy, watch basketball and probably listen to every past episode of the Run TMC podcast in celebration. How about yourself?
I'm looking at the calendar. It looks like, unfortunately, I have a very early shift in the emergency room that day on December 21st. But often on the early shifts, it is kind of slow. I don't want to jinx myself. So I'm going to queue up season 2, episode maybe 11 with Professor Hollander. And I'm going to give that a nice listen. I'm going to work, and then I'm going to go find some place to play basketball later that day, whether it's my driveway or over at the church. My brother has a church basketball game over in Berkeley, where we joke, he goes to church every Sunday because it's virtually the only thing on his schedule that is not movable. Or, maybe I'll just play some Papa Shot with Holden. I'll get some basketball in. Don't worry.
Sounds great. Okay. As promised, let's get to our interview with Coach Bryan Rooney. He is the head coach of Cal State East Bay. We go through his bio in the interview. We won't do that here. He's an incredible coach, motivator, super thoughtful. I thought this was a fantastic discussion. I've listened to it. I've re-listened to it about 5 times since we interviewed him, because there are things that I keep writing down that he said that I'm like, oh, I'm gonna steal that. I'm gonna steal that. Just awesome guy. He's influenced a lot of our friends who we talk about in the interview. So can't thank Coach Rooney enough. Let's get to the interview. First, we'll do some shout outs to our sponsors, right, Duff?
Yeah. First, 2 player control. And number 1, I had to leave this interview early because I went to play basketball. I apologize, Coach Rooney. And number 2, I think due to the fact that my microphone is highly sensitive, it's an HSM, highly sensitive microphone.
Sensitive microphone.
Call back to Tasha Jackson. Yeah, you might hear a little bit of scattered heavy breathing. I was on my desk cycle during the interview and not realizing that I was perhaps exerting myself slightly more than I realized. So hopefully AI will take that out, but if not, player control there. And Dave, we're going to get to your copy on Encore Custom. But first, shout out to the Hub. Jerry and Rebecca, they sent me some seasonal copy. So here we go with the Hub. The Hub is studded in Christmas gear with holiday music filling the air. We have launched our famous crushed peppermint candy milk shake. Hand-spun vanilla ice cream, peppermint simple syrup, crushed peppermint candy canes, crumbled Oreos garnished with a spoonful of candy cane dust. And Dave, I have a picture of this that I'd like you to put out on Insta, if that's okay. He's nodding. We have also launched our new backyard special, coined the Holidays. We have created a mouth-watering sando that contains our grilled organic chicken breasts with pepper jack cheese, jalapeno corn slaw, that's jalapeno corn slaw, tossed in chef's homemade ranch dressing, applewood smoked bacon, that's my favorite type of smoked bacon, red onions, and tomatoes on our French roll. In addition, this is like, how can there be more? In addition, Santa Claus is coming to town at the Hub from 4 to 6 on December 18th. That's 4 to 6 on December 18th, with the backdrop of live patio holiday tunes provided by San Anselmo's own Dan and Connor McGuire. Thank you to the Hub.
That sandwich sounds really good. Wow.
That does. Yeah.
Thank
I'm
you,
not
Jerry.
sure about the shake, a little sweet, but for the kids, perfect. Perfect. Okay, now on to Encore Custom.
We are sponsored by Encore Custom. From the field to the gym and everywhere in between, Encore Custom designs high-performance team apparel built for athletes, coaches, and active communities. Each piece is crafted with technical precision, modern fits, and customizable details that bring your team identity to life. Shop their ready-to-wear performance gear online or in-store, or create custom designs made exclusively for your team. Visit www.encorecustom.com or stop by their headquarters at 891 4th Street in San Rafael, California, to see where performance meets design. Thank you, Neil, and the Encore Custom team for your support. We love you.
Well done, Dave. And just an addendum to this, we have an online pop-up store with Encore Custom in development coming soon with a new fabric and a new design for our Run TM tees that have been a favorite in the community for almost 3 years now, Dave.
Love it. Can't wait for the store to get live. Good work, Duff. All right, we're going. Coach Bryan Rooney, thank you so much for joining us, Coach.
Thanks so much for having me. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, your name will not be a new one to many of our listeners. You've been mentioned a lot in our episodes over the years because you're one of the best coaches around, and you've influenced a lot of the people we've talked to, which is just a testament to your mindset and abilities. I'll do the quick intro for Coach Rooney. So, grew up in Stockton, California, lovely Stockton. Played 1 year of Division I football for St. Mary's. What position were you?
I was a receiver at St. Mary's. Yeah, it's a great year, but kind of the love of basketball kind of drew me back to where I was supposed to be in the gym for sure.
Gotcha. And then you transferred to San Joaquin Delta College, where you played hoops. You then finished your collegiate career close to our home here at Dominican. So you were all conference point guard, won the school's athlete of the year award as a senior. Who was your coach at Dominican, Coach?
Bill Tressler. Yeah, I was super fortunate, and I think we'll certainly get into it. We're all on here because we love basketball, but we're also very fortunate to be in roles as coaches. And I've been so fortunate and blessed along kind of the way of the journey to have outstanding coaches from, going back to my first coach being my dad, and certainly in high school with John Gustorf. And then I played for Brian Katz at the junior college level. And then I finished with Bill Tressler at Dominican, and he's in the Hall of Fame. And we were there in kind of some very formative times in, I think, Dominican, certainly athletics and the basketball program. And I learned a ton of stuff that, we'll head into practice here in a little bit. And I'll use some of the same things that I learned as a player along the way and all the different stops. And so the time at Dominican was awesome. Met my wife there. We bring our kids back to kind of the old stomping grounds. And so unless we're playing them on a given year, I'm rooting for the Penguins all the time. And unfortunately, we do not play them this year. So Justin Arsenault is doing a tremendous job there, and I'll be rooting for them all the way through. And hopefully we can both get the NCAA tournament, and then I can change my tune for one night.
Awesome. So you went from Dominican, then you did a couple quick stints at San Francisco State and at Claremont McKenna before you became head coach at Cal Maritime in 2007. We're going to get to your Cal Maritime experience. 200 victories, 7 conference championships in 10 seasons. You were coach of the year in the Cal Pac for 6 of those 10 seasons. You then went on to Cal State East Bay, where you are currently. You joined there in 2017. You've collected over 100 wins there, so you're a 300-win head coach. You've got, various Marin connections as well. We're not going to go too in the weeds, but a couple shout outs. You recruited Andy Johnson, who was a legendary player at Drake, a good friend of ours. I think he was one of your first recruits at Cal Maritime. Is that right?
Absolutely, definitely. And I don't know, he might have shared the story with you, but so I got the job in July of that year. So my wife and I were still living in Southern California. So we're doing most of the recruiting, kind of over the phone, but I made a trip up to Northern California, I think to maybe kind of see where my office was going to be on campus and kind of get the lay of the land. But more importantly, where my office was going to be is we had to build a team. And Andy was a guy that I had known about when he had played in high school, and then he had gone and played junior college level. And so he's somebody that obviously the local ties and trying to keep him close to home, was important and part of our angle. And so I did a home visit, actually kind of going down, right down by where he played high school basketball. And I pulled up and it's my first go around as a head coach. And so I think it was my second overall home visit as a head coach. And so I'm sitting in the living room with Andy and his mother, and I think it went pretty well. And we talked about, we offered him a spot, and we had, we didn't have very much scholarship money at Maritime at the time, but we offered him, kind of some of what we had, and thought it went pretty well. And it was kind of like that awkward pause. Like, it was like, I'm thinking, let's just get this done. Let's go, sign up, let's get rocking. And his mother is mothers are their infinite wisdom, kind of had to kind of wait a little bit. So I'm driving down, and I've got kind of my head down a little bit as I get to a stoplight. And fortunately, I got a phone call from Andy. He said, "Hey, Coach, can you turn around and come back?" And I turned around. He came back, and he ended up committing there. So Andy's one of my favorite players I've ever coached, and it's so awesome seeing him now coaching. It's so awesome seeing him as a tremendous husband, tremendous father, and there's absolutely no surprise for me that in all 3 of those roles that he's flourishing, because I got the chance to see just who he was every day, work ethic wise. And I think he's still dunking on his birthday, which is something I'm very envious of. But yeah, Andy is the best.
Yeah, we play against him in our adult league. And it's a fun story for us who know Andy. But even if you don't know Andy, this is a glimpse into the recruiting process. Here you are, you're on the road, you're sitting in the house with the family, and you're putting yourself out there. We're going to get to kind of the recruiting world, but that's just one good snapshot. Another connection that's near and dear to us is you hired Tyler Gaffney as one of your assistant coaches. And Tyler, one of our favorites, and we think one of the best, if not the best coaches in Marin. So he speaks very highly of you. And the way that Tyler connects with players and cares about them as humans, he mentions you as someone that was a mentor to him. So
yeah, the journey, as coaches, certainly as a head coach, and it's all about the players and it's all about the staff, in my opinion. And having the opportunity to work with Tyler for that time I grew a ton, to be quite honest with you, and being able to learn from him. he actually, there's a connection in Claremont where he played. And as you mentioned, I coached there for a year with Ken Scalmanini, who I think is one of the best coaches around at any level. And so got a chance to kind of follow Tyler from afar. And he was an unbelievable, I think probably one of the best players that's ever played at Claremont. And I say this with all respect to him as a player, he's a better coach. And so for him and just his ability, X's and O's wise, but also to your point, make that connection. It's kind of funny. So he'd play with our guys a little bit in the spring. And I remember watching some of the practice film from the spring and I'd watch, I said, we got to get that guy. We got to recruit that guy. And he let me know his eligibility was done and he already played professionally. So the next best thing was having a desk right next to him for a couple of years.
Awesome. So you've been a head coach at the college level for, call it 20 years, right? Or you've been coaching in college 20, head coach for 18-ish. The game has changed. We've talked about it a lot. There are some fundamental changes to the game, just offensive actions, spacing, all that stuff. But it's also changed just, I assume, with how you connect with players, how the game is run at the college level. Take a step back and discuss what's changed over the 20 years for you and how you kind of deal with that change on a year-to-year basis.
Yeah, I think there is a great deal of change, certainly at our level, whether it be the transfer portal or how recruiting has changed and eligibility rules and all the different, kind of fallouts that occur. I do think there are a lot of things that are the same. And so we talk about this every year at the beginning of the year. For us, we have a picture on our wall. It's kind of a poster, and each year we add a word, and that wall is our transformative wall, right? So are we transactional with one another? Or are we transformative with one another? And so I think that's the piece. I think one of the biggest things that's changed, it's become easier and more accepted to be transactional. I think about, the coaches that I've had and teammates and guys that I went to, my daughter had a game. She plays at Northgate High School and she played Granada the other day. Well, one of the assistant coaches was a guy that I played with at Dominican, and we're 20 plus years. And, I see him, I see his name's Keith Carroll. I see Keith Carroll, and we pick up just like where we left off because our relationship when we played together was so important. Right. And so I think that's one of the things that we have to fight against. Like, is it easier to transfer right now? Absolutely. Is it more accepted to transfer? There's no doubt about that. And so one of the things that's very, very important for me is to stay true to kind of who I am and why we got into this, and really investing in players, but also trying to communicate to them and hopefully they experience how much they get out of truly investing in the situation. And so I think the landscape has changed in many ways, but the success of teams, I think the ingredients of what goes into that recipe, I think that remains the same. It's just a little bit harder sometimes to get there.
Coach, I love that, the transactional versus transformational. That does seem like a great way to capture the current environment and how it's shifted. How do you see that play out on the floor with your players that might be more transactional, just in terms of the transfer portal? But what are you seeing on the floor that you have to kind of watch for and try and correct if you can?
What's interesting for us, I think when you look at our roster right now, is so we have a number of seniors, and some of them have been with us come right out of high school. So a guy like Ramsey Huff played at Corona Centennial. They won a state championship of the Open Division. His senior year, he played, his high school teammate, is playing, for the 76ers right now, McCain, and a really, really good golf. So he played on a high level team. And so we have guys that have been with us from the beginning who saw kind of the vision of that we had and the vision we had for them. And then we also have, guys, a good example, Demetrius Klanaris, who graduated 2 years ago from us. He played at Cal, right? So he played at Cal. He's from Greece originally. His first offer was from Texas Tech when he's 16 years old, right? And so when he's 16 years old, playing for Cal State East Bay is obviously never on his, kind of plan. And so when we look at it, to your point of the idea of transactional, we get guys from the beginning of their journey, but we also get guys that they've kind of seen it. They've seen the transactional side of it. They've gone through it where maybe the coach decides really early, hey, this guy's just not good enough. And they're kind of moving off, from him, and they want to be in an environment where they're going to be able to be supported in that way. And so that's the piece of it. Sometimes we have guys, they don't have to deviate from their path. And other guys, they kind of see what they don't want. And that's where that transfer. And so that's where, people will say to me, they'll say, oh, the transfer portal, it's bad. It's this and that. And it's like, I think it's like most things in life. It's really a case by case situation. If we generalize that it's all good or it's all bad, I think we get ourselves into trouble in that way. And so to directly to your question of like, if you're a player that makes others better and affects winning in a positive way, by nature for us, that's transformative. You're literally transforming the experience of that team on the court, in the locker room, on campus, and all of the combination that goes in with that. And so for a player that comes out and he's only interested in scoring, well, that's going to be really hard to win with that guy. And so being really direct in the recruiting process, being really direct, if that situation happens, when they're in our program, is what's most important to you? And we ask them that in the recruiting process and not a lot of guys are going to say, hey, coach, it's most important. I want to get 20. That's the only thing that matters to me. But if we sense that in it, that they're just not going to be a good fit. Now, we might play against them and they might be very good players, but we're not just looking for that one, Thursday or Saturday night to be successful. We want it to be sustainable, and we want that, kind of sustainability to be long after, they graduate. And that's where the relationship pieces of it are, right? You go back to a guy like Andy, I mean, I could, go on, and I'm sure you both could as well, is the relationship piece of the investment that we have in one another, that has to be ongoing.
Well, we know getting 20 a night for Andy was never an issue. especially in our adult league, our over 35 league. He'd get 20 in the first half often.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I was going to say, when I'm guarding him, it's pretty light work for him when that happens. But so, Coach, this is a good segue into recruiting, which is always an interesting topic. Obviously, more interesting now than ever with, as you've alluded to, the transfer portal and everything that's going on. But how do you approach recruiting? Are you primarily, let's talk about high schoolers first. Are you looking at club AAU as the first line of defense, or do you like to watch high school games? Like, where do you start the recruiting process with someone out of high school?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing right now is trust. Like who do we trust? And so when you say, hey, we're going to go watch an AAU tournament, number one is we're going to kind of first start from an AAU standpoint of recruiting people, from coaches, from directors that we trust, that we know they have a track record of, and it might sound kind of funny, they have a track record of telling us the truth. If you go to a guy and he's always saying, well, this guy's a Division I guy, or this guy is, he's too good for you, and that whole thing, and then that guy ends up, being, not necessarily a Division I guy all the time, then there's a breakdown in that trust. And again, like, everybody wants to, I should say everybody, a lot of people, they want to play at the highest level, and that's all. And we communicate to our guys is in order for us to win at the level we want to win at, we want guys that can play on Division I rosters. We want guys that can contribute. And if you look at our roster, we have numerous guys over the past 4 or 5 years that have been able to do that. So going back to that point is, we're going to watch high school games. We're going to watch AAU games. We're going to go to practices. We're going to go to open gyms. We're going to do all of that goes into it. And the film is great. I think for whether it be scouting or recruiting, the film is great. But I think the best thing to do is to be able to sit in the stands, to be able to sit in the baseline and watch that player play, right? What are his interactions with his teammates? How does he respond when things are going well, right? When he makes a shot, what's the first thing that he does? So the first thing he does is he looking in the stands to make sure everybody's looking at him, or does he point the pass at the guy that made the pass to him? When he goes in there and he commits a turnover because he didn't come to 2 feet, is he sprint back on defense? Is he engaged with when coach is trying to, get him to move on to the next play? Does he do that organically? And so that, evaluation is, kind of all inclusive. It's a comprehensive experience in many ways. And so for us, we're really not at the point where we're going to say, hey, we're only going to recruit high school guys. We're only going to recruit transfers. We want to put the best group together. And it's not always the most talented players. They have to have talent. There's a requisite amount of talent, but do those pieces fit? And so the evaluation that we have is, like tonight after practice, I'm going to a high school game and I'm going to watch that high school game. And I know the player we're watching is good enough for us, right? From a talent standpoint, is he the right fit? Does he make players around him better? And that's honestly the bottom line of what we're trying to look at.
That's great, Coach. When you're going to a high school game and you're watching, where do you like to sit when you're watching?
It depends. I think sometimes if we want to know, or if we want the family and the kid to know, we're going to sit real close proximity to the family. We're going to sit, right next to mom or dad, or in that way. Sometimes, we'll sit right across from the bench because we want to see those interactions. Sometimes I'll sit 2 rows behind the bench and be really direct of, I want that guy to know that we're here. I want him to know not only our level of interest, but it's not just a level of interest, but where our level of interest is in the evaluation. Like what is he? Is he the same guy, every single day? And there's little details on it. So, like a 7:00 game, sometimes, I'll want to get there for the JV game and say, well, why get there for 5:30? Well, if that guy's a senior on campus and he's a captain of the team, is he there for the JV game or is he the last guy to get in the gym? And so that's where, I think when, Dave asked earlier is a lot of things have changed, and I think they have, but there's so much information out there to gather, but you have to work at it. I think if you're always going back and you're having somebody tell you the information and you're not working to find out information, we're the ones that have to coach them when they get here. And so having as much of a background in who they are, certainly as a player, that's part of the evaluation, but who they are as a person, their areas of growth, their areas of strength. So again, I wouldn't say I'm going into a gym, I'm sitting in the same exact spot, every single time. I like to kind of move around, so to speak.
And what about when they come off the floor? Say they come out of the game for water. What are you looking for?
Yeah, I'm looking for the engagement, right? Because most time when guys go off the floor, there's going to be an interaction with a coach, right? Whether we're the head coach or an assistant. What's the eye contact situation, right? Are they stopping or are they blowing right by the guy, right? When they're going down, most teams, hopefully, right? When a guy checks out of the game, whether it be the best player or the guy that's in the rotation, that entire bench should stand up, right? So what is that interaction with that player when they're walking down the bench, right? Are they making sure they touch everybody in terms of giving them, a bump or a high five or whatever it might be, or they sit down at the end of the bench, right? Are they in the middle of the bench? Are they moving closer to the coach because they know they want to get in? I don't look at that as a bad thing. I think that's a pretty good sign from where it is, but does the team matter to them? I think that's the piece of it. And, kind of getting back to the question about the AAU, one of the, I think, drawbacks, I guess, that some people say AAU is there are so many games that take place. You can play 2-3 games in a day. And is that player invested in every single game? They're not going to play. We see a guy at the beginning of July, at the end of July. Sometimes they're so tired at the end of July physically that they may not perform as well as they did at the beginning of July, but their investment, their engagement in the game and in their team and in their teammates, we're hoping that that's consistent.
That's great stuff. We actually discussed that we did a player roundtable a couple weeks ago, and I asked that question because you hear about, like in Europe, the format is more practices than games really in club basketball, whereas here it's kind of flipped, right? In the AAU season and circuit, they play tons of games and don't really have that much time to practice, and it's interesting. Like you wonder, are kids getting worn out? I mean, even in the NBA, look at all the Achilles, hamstring injuries last year, right? I mean, are players just kind of, is it overuse or are they getting worn out with all these games?
Yeah, I do think it's a balance as well, in it. I think there are some players that if you put them through a skill workout, half hour, 45-minute skill workout, they're going to be fantastic. But then one of the biggest things they need in their development is, okay, now what happens when they're out of a trap and they get a 2-on-1? Are they going to make the right decision every time in kind of that organic nature? And sometimes the game with referees, with people in the stands, with the bright lights on, they need that. And again, so I think that's the piece of, do we have a balance of, yes, there's a skill development, which, as you allude to, the European model really focuses on. But I also think they have to play games. But like probably most things in life, if we say all of this or none of this, then you're going to probably stunt some development along the way.
I totally agree. And particularly at the high school level, I personally see a lot of kids who, as we've talked about, they're awesome dribbling around cones. They've beaten every cone in the county, right? But they're not as comfortable making a decision in a 2-on-1 or in stepping out of a double team and being strong, right? So yeah, I completely agree with you about needing that balance.
Now, I was going to say, we had this conversation the other day in our office after practice, and we have a young man who we think's a really good shooter, but he hasn't shot the ball well. And I think as a coach, right, you have to find what the solution is. And I think part of that is, and you both will be able to speak to it better than I do, but are we doing things in practice, whether it be skill or game-like situation, that replicate what they're going to see in games? And literally sometimes it's a matter of, can we get their heart rate up? So if a guy's shooting and it's like, all right, let's go shoot 50 threes, and that guy's shooting, 40 out of 50, but the last 4 games, he's shooting 15% from 3. I think we have to own some of that as coaches, right? Because that kid's putting in the time, but are we replicating what that looks like? So even in those quote unquote skill sessions, are those skill sessions mirroring, what the games are going to be like? So again, that's the fun part. One of the many fun parts of coaching, right, is that constantly trying to find the solution to the problem.
I love that. That's awesome. That's awesome insight. I wanted to touch on pregame prep. Another Andy Johnson question that I loved. He said, you came into the locker room once wearing a football helmet. Now, I kind of get it because you were a college receiver. I didn't realize that before you sent this, but talk about how do you get your team psyched up for a game, and then you need to tell the story of the football helmet and what the heck you were doing.
Well, I will. So I think the first thing is we had. I remember the helmet. I close my eyes, I can see it right now. It was a green. I played for St. Mary's High School, and we were the Rams, and so we had this. I don't even know why we still had it, but I had this football helmet on, and I think that particular time we were not rebounding very well, and so I was trying to drive home the point to our players that we had to have a mindset of kind of like linemen, right? When the ball is snapped, they can't, I was a receiver, right? So I wasn't in the trenches. But if you're a lineman, every time that ball is snapped, there is going to be contact, right? There's no like, hey, can we dance around it? And so I believe it was some years ago, so it tests my memory, but the message that night was, hey, there's going to be a battle every time the shot goes up, right? So are we going to be first to the fight? Are we going to stick our, literally and figuratively stick our nose in there to go and hopefully we did that night. But I think in terms of the pregame, I think it's really important that our players go out with a great deal of confidence. And that confidence is not just about the, 5-6 minutes that we have the pregame talk, but I want our players to see an investment in energy from our staff. I want them to see an investment, for me in terms of leading them, that there's a belief in them. And I think when you look at, the idea of, and how do you, we've talked about this with our players quite a bit. How do you know that somebody cares about you? The time and effort that they, put forth. And I want our guys in our pregame to have a feeling like, hey, this guy's prepared this. This guy has a belief in us through that preparation. So yeah, we've had some fun pregames, along the way for sure.
I love that. So let's say you got a big game coming up. You're playing a rival. It's a playoff game. It's something that really has import to it. I love the idea of instilling your players with confidence. I mean, obviously that's fantastic. So what's the mindset going into that pregame talk that day? Are you wanting the players amped up? Do you want them super calm and meditative? What kind of mindset, or maybe it's kind of player specific, but in general, what are you looking for out of your team?
Well, I think the first thing, this may come across as a little bit cliche and kind of coach speak, but we have 3 signs in our team room, and the one right above the board, like when we do personnel and game keys and things like that, is win the next game on our schedule, right? So it doesn't matter when that game is, and so yeah, I mean, like human nature, if you're playing a rival and it's a packed house, like that energy is going to be moving a little bit quicker, kind of through the veins. But we want the preparation to be the same. We want there to be consistency. What does it look like on game day? What are we doing in our shoot around and our scout? What are we doing in terms of, kind of pregame, kind of communication, whether it be a team meal or anything that goes into that. And so, there's a saying that I think we've all heard is, don't get too high, don't get too low. And I kind of counter that a little bit in the sense of don't get too low. Right? They're very, very often, if we can just set the floor and we're never going to go below the floor, then we're going to be in pretty good shape. But what I want our guys to understand is we can consistently move the ceiling up, if that makes sense. Like I want them to go. I don't want them to feel like, oh, like I'm into this thing. It's going to be, I'm overboard right now. It's more of a matter of kind of tempering where they are. Can they control that as they elevate that? And just as any player in any skill, like we want them to continue to get better and better. And so can we continue to raise our energy level up, for where it is? So they're going to see that for me. And I think it goes back to the confidence aspect of it is, we come in at halftime and we're down 5 or we're up 5. There needs to be the same level of belief that they see, in me, but also there has to be a charge of energy that's collective, through the entire group.
So when you're prepping for a game, how much are you wanting your players thinking about their opponent and how much do you want them thinking about themselves? I mean, the classic one here is Wooden, right? Wooden. Now, obviously, Wooden coached before Huddle and Synergy and all his technological advancements, but he was really said, like, look, if we play our game, we'll be fine. Now, John Wooden had the benefit of having amazing talent, but he really wanted the focus to be on them, on themselves. Obviously, there's a balance between knowing who you're playing and their tendencies and the scout, but also just your kids kind of executing on what you're doing. So how much of your pregame mindset talk on the board, what are you doing, scout versus focus on us?
Yeah, so I think this comes back to just for me, but kind of background, and this is kind of guys that I played for. I thought the guys that I played for and I learned, from it as a player and as an assistant, they were great teachers. And one of the common message of just, I think as a teacher, as a coach is each player is going to need something different, right? How they learn, whether it's, kind of style of learning or, kind of reception. And at the same time, as a team, there has to be a foundational level. And so like, for example, for us, we're going to have, we'll go into a game tomorrow, right? So we go into that game tomorrow and we take their top rotational guys. And as a team, we're going to watch, 8 to 12 clips on every single of those rotational players. And then when we go into their actions of what they're going to run offensively, and the same thing of how they're going to guard us, what they're doing from an OB standpoint, how they're going to guard OBs. And so there's a foundational base level that everybody is going to get, that everybody needs. We've kind of decided as a staff going into that game, this is what they're going to need. But then you also have some guys, they want more of that. I had a player come in before last weekend when we opened up our season, and he goes, Coach, can I get more, right? I'm guarding, 21, to start the game. And so we sent him it was the first game, first weekend of the season. So they had only had one game. And so we sent him every clip, every score from the previous year, right? So that guy scored like 114 baskets or whatever it might be. Because for that player, he wanted that. That was part of how he learned. At the same time, there are other guys, if you do that for other guys, they're going to overload. They're going to overload. They're going to be thinking too much. And then that's going to slow down their process, kind of in preparation, but that's going to slow them down on the floor. And that's obviously extremely counterintuitive to what we're trying to do as coaches. And so it's kind of meeting kind of two masters, so to speak, is what do we need to provide to the team? And then what does each player need in their own development from where that is? And I think that's the same thing from a game day. We'll get in, like we have a game tomorrow and our shoot around scout starts at 9:30 and we'll go for about an hour, 15 minutes. And there'll be guys that'll be in there before, right? That they'll want to get, half an hour of shooting before. There's some guys that want to shoot afterwards. And there's some guys that they want to go take a nap, to be, right before the game, because that's part of their process. And that's our job as coaches, is to be able to know what the team needs, and also to invest in our players from a relationship standpoint as it relates to, in this case, the game, to know what they're looking for. And some of that's by observation, and some of that I think is literally having the conversation with them is, how do you think you learn best, right? And then why do you think you learn best? What's the body of evidence in that? And sometimes guys think they learn best in a certain way, and it may or may not be. I mean, that's kind of part of their, educational journey. And that's certainly, in my opinion, extends beyond basketball.
So now let's go to in the game. I'm always fascinated talking to great coaches like yourselves about how you coach within the game and how you manage timeouts and communicate to your team in timeouts. So let's start with coaching. I'm victim of, or guilty, I should say, of just, I overcoach during games. There's no difference between my brain and my mouth, and I just say it. And I know the kids aren't absorbing anything that I'm saying. It's totally unproductive. How do you manage, coaching mid-game? How much are you barking a lot of instructions at your players, or are you kind of letting them play and then waiting for timeouts?
I think it's a bit of a balance. I think there's with timeouts specifically, there's a strategy into it, right? So for us, we get 4 timeouts, and you're gonna lose one, after the first half, no matter what. And so it's little details, like you probably don't want to take a full timeout in the first half, because you only get one of those for the entire game. And, like in the second half, the first timeout's going to turn into a full timeout. So you probably want to take a 30 there. And so there's some strategy, I think, within that connects to your team, but I think just connects to the game flow, as well. And I think, and this, I think, has to do with, kind of across the board. I really think it's, for me at least, and each coach I think is a little bit different. It depends on your team, right? And so if you have a really veteran team and they have, kind of some experience, and they've been able to show that they can work through it. Like team hit back-to-back threes and they can work through that, and we're going to execute, and we're going to maybe get to the foul line, and that's going to be a focus of ours. And then there's other teams where that 6-0 run could turn into a 12-0 run, and we gotta take a timeout. And when we take that timeout, there's got to be a centering focus from where we are. And so I try to do a good job, and certainly I'm, I think like most people, I certainly am a work in progress. But in those timeouts of making sure that at the end of that timeout, there's got to kind of be a little bit of a recap. And that recap can't have 5 things. It's got to have 1 to 2 things of what we're looking to execute when we come out of that timeout. Because again, there's so much stuff that's going on, whether we're coming, a positive thing and the other team took a timeout. So I think that's the other piece of it is coaching out of timeouts that we don't take, right? So not allowing a timeout that the opposing team takes to give them momentum, stop ours, continue theirs, or whatever it might be. But I think like most things is the communication we have with our players. And then are we doing things in preparation for the game that are going to be in sync with what it looks like out of a timeout, right? So as an example, we go into the game tomorrow. Part of our practice today when we go through and we're going through our offensive action is, hey, if we're down by 3 and we're looking late clock, these are the 1 to 2 things that we're looking to run. So now if we get in that situation tomorrow in the game, those are not brand new. We're writing them up on the board so our guys can see it physically, going back to kind of that how guys learn. But it's not the first time that they've seen it. It's not the first time that they've run it. And so how many, without going overload, but how many scenarios can we do in practice that are going to replicate what they're going to see in a game? And so going back to your question with a timeout, during practice, we'll have chairs or stools that will have, hey, timeout right now, boom, 1 through 5, you're sitting down, we have a huddle, here's where the scenario is. Hey, it's a 30-second timeout. We have a manager, we have a coach that's hitting the buzzer. Sometimes we'll have a coach that will act as an official or referee, and they'll come out and say, all right, let's go. Got to get out of the huddle like they're going to do to us and try to get us out on the court. And so again, trying to replicate as much as they can. There's a ton, and this is the beauty about basketball, in my opinion. There's a ton that we cannot predict, but the things that we can predict, the things that we can prepare, doing those at the highest possible level, for our guys and for our team is, in my opinion, a very important part of how we manage timeouts.
Coach, how much do you prepare for what you're going to say in a timeout before the game even begins? Do you have like in your head, okay, we're up, we've just gone on a run, and then the opponent calls a timeout. Here's kind of what I might say, and then lead into something specific that you've just noticed. Is that something you actually script ahead of time, or is it more like you have to see what's going on in the game to be able to know what you're going to say to the team in that moment?
Yeah, I think there's some schematics to that of knowing, okay, hey, we're coming out of a timeout. This is what we're going to look to do, right? So an example would be, we're playing the team, and based on film study, we're seeing every time they come out of a timeout or a high percentage of it, they're a man team, but they're going to come out in zone, right? And so those are things to kind of kind of think about that a little bit for me of, hey, if we know it, we're not going to say, hey, they might zone, so be ready for it. It's saying, hey, if they zone, we're running this. Right. And or get in a situation where we want to be able to, we talked about this a different topic, but if we're going against a man or a zone, having offensive action that we can run against either one. So it's not, okay, they're run zone. Okay, let's stop and run something else, or they're running man. So those are, I think, part of the preparation things that we try to do. But the exact things that we're going to say, I think that's based on game flow. That's based on how a team is playing, how a guy is playing. We might go in and say, hey, we really think we can attack them with X action or Y or whatever it might be. But the game is, oh, shoot, we're really getting down to transition. Let's continue to attack and transition. So being flexible in that way is, I try to set myself up that way.
Assistant coach question. So how do you use your assistants in a timeout? Are you one of those coaches that likes to huddle for a full timeout with your assistants for 10, 15 seconds? Or are you getting input from them before the timeout? Or do you just, you put them in their place and just ignore them like we should be ignored?
I wouldn't call it ignoring them. If I do not go to our assistants right away, that means I'm not very happy with our team. And I'm going to take that full timeout to address them of where we need to go and how we need to course correct. Most timeouts, right? We kind of coordinate it. So we have an assistant who coordinates our offense. We have an assistant who coordinates our defense. We have an assistant that coordinates kind of our press and what we call like special teams. And so I'll hit each one of them, right? So I'll go to, and I say this with all sincerity and honesty. I'm very, I think, self-aware in the standpoint that my assistants are way smarter than I am. That's part of the reason that we've kind of used them as coordination. And so I'll go to them and say, hey, what are you seeing? Because I think when we give our assistants an opportunity to really focus on a specific area of the ball or an area of the game, they're going to watch it through a lens that I'm going to miss some of that stuff, right? Not intentionally. That just happens. And so being able to go and say, hey, Duff, you're coordinator of offense. What are you seeing right now? How are they guarding ball screens? Or I go to Dave, hey, right now defensively, what do you think we should be doing when they're running their stagger action? And being able to take those things, and not all of that's going to be connected to the players, because again, goes back to that timeout. They're not going to be able to handle all of that, and I'm not going to be able to deliver it in a way that's going to be digestible in a minute, so to speak. But that might be the next timeout that comes. Next timeout comes and says, okay, hey, we want to make sure that we hit that based on who has the ball coming out of the timeout. So we take advantage of the talent and just the investment of our assistant coaches at a very, very high level. And our players understand, I think if you asked them, I think our players understand that the message that they're getting from our assistants, it's the same message that they're going to get. So if they come off the floor, going back to your question earlier, when a guy checks out of the game, when we're watching from a recruiting standpoint, when I go back and I watch the film, I'm looking for our players when they check out of the game, because I know our assistant coaches are going to be giving them something worthwhile, and they need to be receptive, obviously, to accept that.
What portion of the game do you like to just let your kids play? And, obviously you guys run Princeton, you run a beautiful motion. How often are you manufacturing points, calling sets, kind of orchestrating versus just letting them play, roughly?
Well, it's interesting. Yeah, it's interesting because we've run, kind of some quote unquote Princeton concepts in the past, and we're doing that a little bit this year, but I wouldn't call us like a Princeton team. And so for us, just kind of philosophically is, we're going to run action that we believe best puts our players in the best situations, right? Both individually and collectively. So that's going to change year to year, right? So a team, my first year as a head coach when Andy played for me, we're not running any of that stuff, right? And now 3 years later, we might be running the same thing that we're running, 15 years later. So I think to that point is we really try to, defensively, we're pretty much going to play one way. We're not a big zone team. We're going to man, quite a bit from where we are. So not really negotiating what we're going to do on the defensive end for a couple of different reasons. But offensively, I really think it has to fit, kind of what we have skill-wise, kind of just to the strengths of our players. The idea of where we are, like we'll go into a game and we'll have, like to the football example, right? Football goes into a lot of teams, they'll script the first 15 plays. First 15 plays, this is what we're going to run. This is where we are. So we'll have what I call kind of like a semi-script, right? Where we'll tell our as a staff, say, hey, this is what we're looking to run. But I'll tell our players, I've told them the first we play 2 exhibitions and 2 counters. And I'll tell them again tomorrow is, here's what we're looking to run. If we don't call a play for the first 5 minutes because we're getting out in transition, we're playing advantage basketball, that means we're in a good spot. So the plays that we run are not dictating the success that we have, right? It's how we are executing, how we're sharing the ball, how we're distorting the defense, how we're creating advantages on a consistent basis. And we, again, talk a great deal, probably as most coaches do, of what our defense does to create those advantages from an offensive standpoint. Are we playing complementary basketball, together so they can kind of resource each other? So if we get to the second media timeout and we haven't called one play, my feelings are certainly not going to be hurt. And we're probably playing pretty well offensively.
So what would you say it's a hard question, but I'm sure you're going to answer it beautifully, Coach. What would you say are your non-negotiables? What's your kind of as a team, and then maybe 1 or 2 things on offense that are just kind of Coach Rooney staples, and then 1 or 2 things on defense?
Yeah, it's funny. So when I interviewed for the East Bay job, one of the questions was, how many team rules do you have? And, in that answer, I'm thinking about it before I answer. I'm thinking, well, is this kind of the make or break time? Because my answer was 1. And so I think sometimes, people and things work differently for different people. They want to have, 25, 50 rules, have a big manual. And ours is real simple, be a great teammate. And that may sound vague, but it goes back to the idea of to be transformative. And so are you doing that? So that's a non-negotiable thing, right? So a guy going to class and sitting in the first 2 rows of class, that's a transformative thing, right? A guy going and opening the door for somebody else as they enter into a building, like that has to be part of our standard. In the same way that from an offensive standpoint, if we have the opportunity to push the ball ahead in transition to find an open player, we need to be able to do that. And so, it crosses beyond the court, obviously. But from an offensive standpoint, what we talk about a lot is we talk about the idea we're searching for A shots. And what we define A shots is a rim attack with an advantage. And that advantage is going to be different for different guys. So if it's Tyree Campbell, who's, 6'5", 6'6", 215 pounds, and he's got a guy on his hip and he can elevate, over him and kind of through him, that's going to be there. For our 5'11" point guard, that's not necessarily going to be an advantage. And so that, kind of defining what an advantage looks like for each guy, or an uncontested 3. So we're looking for, like, our non-negotiables offensively are a rim attack with an advantage and an uncontested 3. Now, again, not to, make things, always gray, but that uncontested sometimes is different for different guys, right? So if there's a guy, within, the air, 3-foot airspace with some guys, that's a contested shot. Some guys, if that guy is, 3 feet away, but he's got his hands down, we're going to consider that, an uncontested shot for Andrew Camacho this year, right? He needs to shoot that thing every time. And so for us, we really try to dial into that. We talk about the quality of threes that we get. So for us, we want a great 3. So how we define a great 3 is we want to go inside, we want to go out, and we want to change sides of the floor. So how we go in and out, that can be off penetration, that can be off a post enter, that can be middle penetration, that can be baseline. We want to change sides of the floor. We want to dent the defense with a paint touch, and we want to find an uncontested one. Defensively, we go a little bit more, quote unquote, structured. So we have 4 non-negotiables every time. So for us are we communicating? Are we talking? Do we have active hands? Are we using airtime? Meaning when the ball moves, everybody's moving. And then do we rebound? So that's how we kind of define those. And we'll do a drill in practice that our players don't always love, but we'll put 3 teams. And if non-negotiables are followed, they get to stay on defense and they get to keep earning points. But as soon as one drops, whistle blows, boom, you're off, new group is on. So that has been a good one for us over the years.
Yeah, that's great. Going back to your 3-point shooting philosophy for your team this year, what would be the ideal breakdown between 3-point shots and good 2-point shots? Is it 50-50? Is where ballpark me as to given what you're looking for when you look at the stats after the game?
Yeah, I think we don't, to be honest with you, we don't really look at exactly there of like, is it 50-50? Is it 60-40? There's going to be games that we might shoot 33s. There might be a game that we shoot 23s. It's more of the quality of shot that we're going to get. So if, like, let's say we take 15 threes and we end up taking, 40, 45 twos, but those 15 threes are, all contested, they're same side, 1-pass threes. I would much rather shoot 33s, right? Where we're shooting a higher quality of shots and vice versa. So what we're really trying to do is, how do we put the defense in a position where they have to have multiple guys react to the action, right? Whether that's transition action, whether that's ball screen action, whether that's penetration, whether that's post enter. And so if we can do that, we feel the quality of shots we're going to get are percentage wise. So like, as an example, we played Cal Poly San Luis Obispo in an exhibition, kind of our first, kind of as a group together. And I think we had 33 made field goals and 22 are assisted. So we look more at the percentage of assists to made baskets. So if we can be in that range of like 60 to 70 plus, that's pretty, I think it's pretty good basketball, from where we are. And I think the last thing we look at too is, are we getting to the free throw line? So like I think we average in our first opening weekend, we average about 30 free throw attempts. And part of that is, there are a lot more whistles early in the year than there are later in the year, usually. But also I think it had to do with just the aggression of our guys attacking the rim, which is all, no matter, what we're going against defensively, is always going to be a priority.
All right, Coach. Duffy is a total nerd. I think you know this. He loves the stats. So let's talk stats.
That's part of the reason. I don't mean to, but that's part of the reason I keep listening. I love it. I love the nerd stuff.
Totally. Nerds unite. #nerd life. All right. What stats what are the stats that we're not tracking that we should? Do you have, and Duffy and I talk about this, and Duffy's coaching with a guy, Kevin Vasquez, who's a great coach, played at Davis, played for Bob Williams, awesome, very analytical. They're always talking about the stats that you don't track, and I'm sure Duffy can rattle off a few, but what do you think?
So I think probably ones that people already track. So we're big on deflections defensively. Sorry, are we tracking deflections? Are we tracking from an offensive standpoint? We're tracking paint touches. How many times are we getting 2 feet in the paint? And then we break those down, right? So how many times are we getting the paint on 2 feet? How many times are we getting the paint on 2 feet? And there's a secondary action. So we're getting into the paint and we have a lift fake. We get into the paint and we're playing pivot game off of that. Or are we getting in there and we're off of 1 foot? Whether we're going to finish, we're trying to go to score, or we're going trying to find, somebody from a teammate standpoint. One of the 2 big ones that we do that are maybe not always tracked, and we haven't always tracked them, but we've tracked them the last couple of years, and I think they've been positive, have been corner touches. So we will track, and like in practice and in games, but obviously we have way more practice than we have games. We'll track every possession. And so, Dave's playing, the 2 for us, and he was involved in 30 transitions, both defensively and offensively. And we'll grade them, and our guys will understand what does it mean. So like offensively, if you're a rocket guy for us, which that's like our 5-man, people have different names for it, but are they sprinting? And we don't exactly go rim to rim, but we go a little bit outside of it. Are they sprinting every single time? If they are, that's 1 for 1, right? If they're not, they're 0 for 1. And we track that throughout the entire time. So we look at those. We look at, obviously, from the wing guys, we want them getting all the way to the corner from a spacing standpoint. And then we also grade our rebounding. So there's different ways from a rebounding standpoint. But if you're a crash guy and the shot goes up, there's a place you need to be every time. So shot goes up. If you are hanging out in kind of no man's land that we refer to it, whether you're a crash guy or what we refer to as a get back guy, then you're like, it's going to be a down. And so at halftime, we have a coach that's tracking that in a game. If we're 85 to 95% in our transitions, and I'm not talking about even scoring, I'm just talking about like, are we executing our assignments? We're probably going to be getting a lot more transition opportunities than not. And the same thing I would say from a defensive standpoint, right? Shot goes up. Like if you're a point guard, right? Shot goes up and your guy does not crash, because not all point guards are going to crash. Your responsibility is to find that next guy, to get to the nail and then find the next guy. So you have a chance to earn, right, a defensive, transition, kind of bonus point, for lack of a better term. It's not really bonus. It's just should be expected. Is you have to be part of that. You got to be engaged with it. So I would say really grading out the rebounding, really grading out the transitions, and then again, like the quality of shots that we get. So we talked about it a little bit a couple minutes ago, is what kind of 3 are we getting? So going back to Duffy's question, is we shot 23s. How many of those did we get paint touches on? How many of those did we change sides? So kind of the numbers behind the numbers, so to speak.
You mentioned, Coach, that you're tracking the rebounding, the crashing to spot in real time. Is that just a hand calculation, gestalt, or are you looking at film? Do you have some film that allows you to do that in real time?
Yeah, we film every practice. So we film every practice. So we're grading that out basically every shot that's taken in practice. And then obviously in the games, and, the beauty of synergy, for us, and, sports code and some other teams use and things like that. But yeah, does it take time? Absolutely. But I tell you what, when you meet with a player and you're able to not only show them the clip, but to have information, we talk a lot about as coaches, is how do we build relationships, with our players. I think it's one of the best things. Is I don't care if a guy, and again, go back to roles on teams. If our rotation is 9 or 10, but we're carrying 15 to 17 guys, and you're never showing clips or watching clips of practice with those 11 through 17, that's going to affect the relationship, and that's going to affect the buy-in in a negative way. In the same way, I think it affects it in a positive way, where now we see an investment. So yeah, coach is watching me in practice. Coaches, hey, I didn't crash on that one. He's not giving me a pass. Or I did get out in transition. I really ran. He's seeing that. And again, the idea of role definition is so important. But part of that role definition, to me, it goes back to that investment that we have as coaches in them, into the role.
That's a that's a perfect segue into what I wanted to tackle next, which is something that is your reputation precedes you, and that you're a great coach, 300 wins, but that you're also equally just a great guy, a great person. You connect with these kids. So how do you approach connecting with your players off the court? How do you, it's a very nebulous concept. Some people are good at it. Some people aren't. You're amazing at it. How do you do it?
I'm a work in progress. I will tell you that. So I appreciate you saying that. I'm not where I want to be yet, but I'm working at it. And part of the process and working at it for me is I'm going to meet with every guy individually every single week. And I'm obviously going to, and I tell them this, I see you every day. Like I'm going to talk to you every day, but we're going to have a devoted time that's just ours, right? And we're not deviating from that. And so I tell this story in recruiting, but my first year, where the athletic director is, on our campus is separate from where our basketball office is because we're in the gym. And so he called and said, "Hey, Bryan, I want you to meet about," we were talking about fundraising or something. And I said, "I can't meet, I'll meet one of our players." And he wasn't very happy with me at that moment. But as I told him, and I talked about this in the interview process, is that's non-negotiable. That is our time. And so, yeah, we're going to, depend on the time of the year, we're going to talk about basketball. But that first question always when we're sitting down in my office or we're walking across campus or we're, at, dining center, whatever it might be, is just, how's life going? That's the first thing that we're always going to talk about. Just, and sometimes that's hey, it's awesome, coach. Things are going great. Sometimes they're dealing with stuff from a family, it's things that are going on with family. And so being able to kind of dive into that and devote that time is really important. But I communicate to our players all the time. I hope our players benefit from when we get a chance to interact in those one-on-one situations, because I know that I do. When I think about the relationships that we really try to have with our players, again, that the time and the effort is, you can't do it. I don't think you can build a relationship without it, right? You can't just snap your fingers just because somebody says a good player, they're a good coach. And then, I think also part of it, we're, the changing landscape is what it is, but part of our job, part of my charge is to help them on their academic journey. And so, yes, they're going to have advisors. Yes, our assistant coaches are going to be involved in, study hall and all the things, the academic monitoring, but we're going to talk about that as well. And the last, and then we'll watch film, certain times of the year, especially for the season. But I'm always going to ask them at the end, I will always ask them to come to me with a question. So they always have to have a question in our meeting. That question can be about anything, right? And so one of our guys the other day, we have 2 children, and my son Liam has said, one was, "Hey, how's Liam shooting the ball?" Right? On his CYO team. And another guy asked me, he said, how did you know that your wife was the one? Right? So you're a vast spectrum of, kind of investment in there. And the final piece I'll always ask him is, how can I help them better? And so our most important core value is that idea of servant leadership, and modeling that is, again, a non-negotiable for sure.
That is really awesome. And that is such, a gift to those players, because I can't imagine there are many coaches out there that put in that amount of time and effort and consistency to those one-on-one meetings. So that's amazing. 2 questions, both around the same sort of topic, is how often is the question you get about their role on the team? And then if you're in the situation, which I'm sure you are, every once in a while, where a player, you have to move them out of a lineup, or you have to cut their time because someone, because they're not playing well, or because someone's just better than them on the bench. How do you handle that? I presume that's in these one-on-one meetings, but how do you broach that?
Yeah, I think the first part about it is my hope that if a question comes as it relates to a role, it's a clarifying question. We've already talked about that topic, because that's part of my job. And so we're now into games. And so we talk about roles in kind of 3 levels, in the idea of there's a role definition phase. And that's part of my job, is to define their role. But we also tell them it's part of their job too, because part of my job is to play the best players that give us the best chance to win. So they have to define what their role is by how they play, how they're making the other 4 guys on the floor better on both ends of the court, all those type of things. The second layer to that is role acceptance, right? So they've got to accept the role that they're in, whether that's exactly the role they thought it was going to be, and an understanding that there's a fluidity of that role. Where a guy is at the beginning of the year, where he is in game 5 could be very different where he is in game 20. And so having that conversation to go. And then third layer of it is dominating that role. right? No matter what that is. And so like for us, we only give out one award, right? In our program, it's our Transformer of the Year. And so like we have Ipree Egbe, he's a senior for us. He's the only player I've ever coached that's won it back-to-back years, right? Ipree is not in our rotation, right? I don't know how much he'll end up playing this year, but he absolutely dominates his role and he's indispensable from where you are. So to your question, we've had numerous conversations of that. Hey, coach, what does it look like in my role? If he came to me, really want to play, okay, here's the path for where this would be. But being real honest with you, that path is not in a vacuum. That path includes the fact that they're your teammates that are also battling for a role that you want to have, because the transparency aspect of it, sometimes those are hard conversations, but they have to happen. And so, sometimes those questions will be, Coach, what do you mean by that? And then we got to dig into it. But when they walk out, they're not always going to walk out of the meetings, especially as it relates to a role, being completely happy with that or being the answer they wanted. But it's important, in my opinion, for them to understand the why from my perspective, right? And then I think the last piece of it that I would say as it relates to roles is there has to be a path. There has to be a path. If they say, okay, this is the role, and my role is never going to increase, and I don't just mean in terms of on the court, I mean in terms of as a leader, then we fail them in that moment. And so that's part of our job, is to provide the path and to help them along the way in that path.
That's amazing. And that's like the path is to role domination, whatever that role is. And that's a great way to just create this sense of belonging across your team. So I have to apologize. I have the only possible good excuse for leaving this interview early, which is I'm going to go play basketball with my bros at the Run YMCA, the once a week run. But Coach, I have learned so much already in an hour, and I hope that you and Dave go on for another 2 hours so I can listen to this and learn more. Before I sign off, I did want to read to you what Tyler Gaffney wrote us about you just not very long ago. He says, tell Coach that he is the man. He is the most organized, most disciplined, hardest working coach I've ever known. He is a machine. So, and Tyler doesn't give compliments easy. I know him well enough to say that.
Well, I appreciate that more than he knows. And I learned a ton from him, and I'm going to keep going and watching his teams forever, because he's always going to have good players, but I know I'm going to come out of there learning something that I can help my own team. So Tyler literally is the man. I'll tell you a quick Tyler story. When he first joined us, we were doing this thing called Miles for Meals, where we were running a mile every hour for 24 hours. We're raising some money for food banks. So it was just like kind of during COVID. And so his now wife, his fiance at the time, they sent me a picture, and I think it might have been when they were doing the 2 a.m. mile or something like that. And if I didn't know then or didn't know before, I certainly knew then that guy is invested all the time. So I appreciate the kind words, and more importantly, appreciate the relationship I have with him.
Yeah, that's amazing. All right, thank you again, Coach. You're gonna see the wall in my office while I go play some hoops. But hopefully, get to meet you in person. Come watch one of your games. I'm not surprised at all that you've won 300 games and probably another 600 or 700 to come. So awesome work. Thank you, Coach.
Thanks so much.
Duffy,
6 or 7. 6 or 7.
Duffy, please don't do that, Duffy. Please. We need a lot of paint touches today. We need a lot of uncontested threes. We need some corner touch. We've talked about the non-negotiable stuff. So in your pickup game, Coach Rooney is watching. Right, he has video on it.
And there are probably going to be a few grunts and a couple effort plays, and effort plays are going to get a towel after the game.
Love it.
That's right.
Well, as you know, the only thing that beats coaching is playing. So have a great time.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, guys.
Take care.
All right, Coach. Now that Duffy's gone, we can get to the real stuff now.
Sounds good.
About watching basketball. When you're watching a game, an NBA game, a Division I game, what are you looking for? Are you watching actions? Are you getting really in the weeds? Are you looking at the bench and all the stuff you talk about that you look for in your potential players? Like how you're watching Michigan State, UConn or something. What are you looking for?
Yeah, I think all of the above. I drive my family crazy sometimes because I will. We'll see I'll see an action or something to run and it's a high, it's a 2-point game. There's 30 seconds left to go. And I'm like, hey, let's stop and rewind it, and I'll record on my phone. Yeah. Even though I know the next day it'll be on Synergy, I want to see it in that moment. But I think it's just like last night Troy played USC, and I think it was maybe a double or triple overtime game. And I think I loved watching Troy's bench. Like those guys were so into it, so invested, but it was a lesson because I don't know if USC is, more talented and, more resources and all those type of things. And I don't even know, probably the better team overall didn't win or did win, right? But the better team that night did not win, right? The USC made a last second shot. But one of the things that I loved about the interaction was on both sides, the joy that USC had when the shot went in is what it should be about. It doesn't matter what the level is. It doesn't matter. Now we got NIL stuff. And obviously at that level in the Big Ten, that's a real thing.
Yep.
But there was such a joy and maybe an innocence of in that moment for about 15 seconds, everybody lost kind of what they were thinking about and they were just happy for one another. Right. And so to be able to see that in the moment and then again, I look at the point guard. I don't remember I think his last name's Campbell, number 3 for Troy. I just love how he led his team. And so I'm going to watch a couple of the clips that he had from last night with our team. And I'm going to watch it not in like clipped out fashion. I'm going to watch it like the TV version because of how invested his teammates were in him based on his leadership. So long answer to your question.
That's great.
I try to geek out and watch as much as I can. I love watching, and I love college football. Like I just think watching really good teams is fun for me.
Awesome, love it. So who are your favorite coaches to watch? Who are your influences? Not necessarily people you've played for or coached with, but just out there. Who do you think does it great?
Yeah, I think he's recently retired, obviously, but a ton of respect for Tony Bennett. I thought Tony Bennett and just his approach, how his teams played, but how he handled adversity. I mean, the story of being the first one to lose to a 16 and then turning around and win a national championship the next year, that's from a coach. I think probably just leadership in any capacity. That's about as good as it gets from just an overall dynamic in terms of how to lead teams. And I don't know Tony Bennett, but just talking to people that do or had some interaction is what you're seeing on TV is who he is. And I don't necessarily know if that's always the case, with players or coaches. And so just the authenticity of it. I think one, kind of right in our backyard, Randy Bennett and the job that he's done, just the sustainability of his success is just extraordinary. And being able to just go over to a team camp. And obviously we've, recruited, we'll go to their team camps and watch some high school games and things like that. But just, that truly is a family there, when you talk about kind of the St. Mary's family. So ton of respect for what they do schematically, X's and O's, but just as a program builder and a program sustainer. When I was at St. Mary's playing football was the year right before he took over, I believe. And so that year, the basketball team was like 2-25 or 2-27. And now, I'll date myself, in terms of the number of years and the gray hairs that I've got now. But the job that he's done and his staff has done is amazing. So kind of right in the backyard is kind of cool being able to see that right there. And I think on the NBA level, similar from a building standpoint, Eric Spoelstra, they ran an side OB play a couple weeks ago that they won the game on. And it was the coolest thing. Listen,
on the elevator.
The elevator, and they backstreamed
on the elevator
to the lot. Yeah,
loved it.
And one of the coolest things was he gave credit to his assistant, in the press conference. And again, you talk about the Heat culture, and Pat Riley's absolutely part of that. But I don't know if there's another world that's more transactional than the NBA. But what they've been able to do, you look at a guy like Udonis Haslem. And why is he so connected? And I think, Spoelstra and that entire, kind of organization. So a lot of respect for them. And again, the backyard, the Warriors have been pretty fun to watch. And, those Steve Kerr's obviously established himself as a pretty darn good coach.
Yeah. Great answers. I'm right with you. I love Spo, and I love talking to, I'm sure you've heard our interviews with Brock and Rick Winter and the NBBA guys. They're friends with Spoelstra, Michael Turner, and just that he is who he looks like. He's just a good guy. And he's always
no doubt
intellectually curious and asking questions. And I love that. All right. I got one more for you. Then we're going to hit crunch time. Then I'm going to let you get to practice, Coach.
Sounds good. Appreciate it.
So you mentioned Randy Bennett. That's a perfect lead into this. Because one of the questions that Andy Johnson wanted me to ask you was, how do you build a program? And you look at St. Mary's as a perfect example. You mentioned they were, 2-20 something before he gets there. with Randy, obviously, I'm curious for your perspective on how much of it is recruiting and how much of it is system, because you obviously found this secret or this niche, which is, oh, hey, there are a bunch of really good players in Australia that we could go get, right? Got Patty Mills and others, and he got that kind of international pipeline, Dellavedova, but he also obviously has a great system. When you joined Cal Maritime, Andy Johnson used a phrase that was not this kind. I'll just say the program was not great, and you turned it into a perennial contender. How did you approach building that program?
Yeah, I think the first piece of it, I was so excited. I was just so excited to be a head coach, and it's kind of funny because when I first started coaching, I first got into coaching, and the Maritime job opened up, and I did not apply for the job, and I wasn't ready for it at that time. I think I was an assistant for maybe 1 or 2 years. I was not ready for it at that time, but a couple of years later, I'd been an assistant for 4 or 5 years, and it opened up, and I just remember going through the interview process and just being so excited for the potential opportunity. And that excitement never went away. And I think one of the things, we made plenty of mistakes, but I think one thing that I think we did do well is we didn't listen to people that told us that it had never been done, or we didn't listen to people that said, well, you can't do it like that here. It's like, well,
right.
That I don't, and with all due respect to those people that are saying it, they're not really in a place to tell us that, right? We're going to find that out. We're going to find out whether we can do it or not. We're going to find out whether, this is possible here. Man, it's like every place. Like there were challenges there, and there's challenges for every coach across America, regardless of level. And so, for us, it was really trying to focus on how do we find the solution? So if we run into a roadblock, is that solution, right, something that we can completely control, or do we need somebody's help with that? And so when Andy was there, I remember very early we had a conversation with the team. We said, okay, there's three areas of people in terms of building a program. The first one's going to be there's going to be people that are going to support us no matter what. If we go out there, tomorrow night in a game and we lose by 20, they're still going to support us. Then there's going to be a group, and hopefully it's small on, a campus or, in a setting or dynamic. There's going to be another group that's never going to support you, right? They're just, for whatever reason, they're not basketball people. They think this, they think that. And then there's the middle group, and the middle group's so important because they're on the fence. They can go either way. So we've got to do everything we possibly can to move that middle group to the first group that's going to be there to support us. And, we have the
right.
conversation with our guys on a consistent basis is, why do people support teams? People support teams, and it's not necessarily in this order. It's probably opposite of this order, because you win and you have good people. And so when we were establishing the program at Maritime, it was all about, we need to get good players, no doubt, but we had to have really good people. That's why a guy like Andy was so important, is he was good enough to impact winning on the court, but he was also a guy that was going to be sitting in the first row of accounting class. Was when Harry Portolos, the professor, was asking for somebody to answer a question, he was going to answer the question. He was going to be somebody everybody in that class wanted to be in a group with, for the project there. And so that was a big piece of it, is not listening to people that had an opinion that wasn't part of our plan, right? Somebody telling me, hey, you can't do it, that's not really part of my plan. So all due respect to you, we'll give you a t-shirt, but we're not going to listen to your opinion. And we're just going to try to keep moving and see where we can get from a ceiling standpoint. And if we get to a point that we hit the ceiling, then we got after it, but we didn't self-inflict that ceiling.
That's such great perspective. So it's like politics, right? You got the left, you got the right, you got to get those people in the center, right? The undecideds. Okay, give us a basketball dime, Coach. Give us a book, a show, a podcast. Can't say Run TMC. We know how brilliant we are. So, something that you love. That's like a do yourself a favor kind of thing.
Oh man, I think, and this is it may not be where you're directing to be, but I will tell you the greatest thing I've ever done as a coach is to watch my children play basketball. I love watching my kids play. And I say that for a lot of different reasons, but one of the things is it brings me back to what our job is as coaches. And again, there's multiple, parts of the job, but is to make sure that when their parents are sitting in the stands, that they understand that coach is invested in who they are as a person. and hopefully as a player as well. And that's what, I look at, when next game I go watch it with Northgate High School, like I know that Coach Jim and Coach Mike want the best for my daughter as a point guard, but also as a person and a leader. And the same thing when Liam's playing for St. Bonaventure CYO and NorCal, NorCal, we talk about the idea, you got to earn the word elite. So if it's called NorCal
Right.
Elite. I said, hey, bud, you got to earn elite. But I know that Keith Bruder, his coach. And so that's one of the best things I can do. Like we come off a tough loss, being able to see them play and just, they're so excited. Like my son wants to be there at the game, like 3 hours before the game. I say, hey, bud, you're in 8th grade. There's no shoot around. There's no scouting report. There's no film you're going to watch before. But just to see that excitement and I have a responsibility to make sure that fire that our players have and why they started playing, why they enjoy playing, that we're constantly cultivating that fire. So I love listening to podcasts. I love, kind of the leadership stuff. I geek out on the Atomic Habits. I think is great for all coaches. And we talk a lot about the idea of, kind of creating your own destiny through your habits. But yeah, watching my kids, the best thing I can do as a coach.
Probably the best answer we've had on Dime Time. So that's awesome. Okay, coach, crunch time. And then you got to go coach practice. You got to limit yourself here. Favorite drill?
30-second drill. Put 30 seconds on the clock. You have to get as many stops as required for that shot clock to run out. And so that might mean the offense might take 27 seconds and you get a rebound and there's 3 seconds left. You got to get one more stop. That team might shoot it quick and you might have to get 6 stops in those 30 seconds. Offense rebound resets it. You take a charge, drills automatically over, you win. You get a turnover and score down the other way. We'll take 3 seconds off. Love the drill. It's a drill. Going back to the question earlier about timeouts, we'll reference that drill and timeouts consistently. Hey, this is 30-second drill right now. One stop, one big stop, we win.
So it's 5-on-5, half court.
5-on-5. Yep, exactly.
But then if you get a turnover, you can take it down the other end. Okay, I love it.
The other way. Yep.
I'm talking to KK. We're going to do it today, coach.
Sounds good.
Okay, favorite gym?
I got to give you 3. I have to say our gym here at East Bay. If I don't, I'm not doing my job. So that would be a one up there. Dominican, where I played, we're very fortunate. Every time I go in there, I think about with my teammates cutting down a net, win a championship. And then kind of one that's off the radar a little bit, College of the Ozarks. So when I was playing, they hosted the national tournament for us. And it was one of the coolest things ever. They had, I think it was like 5,500 people in there for games and all 32 teams that made the national tournament. You all play in one gym, over the course of 2 days, and then it goes down to national champion. But that was a ton of fun. But yeah, I would say played in and coached in some awesome gyms, but those 3 are the first come to mind.
That is cool. All right, is that Missouri? Where's College of the Ozarks?
Branson, Missouri. Yep, College of the Ozarks.
Branson. There we go.
Yep.
Awesome. Yep. Okay, this is a tough one. This is a little question. How about best player you've ever coached, and then best player you've ever coached against?
Yeah, so I'll give one. Probably say Evan Wardlow. So Evan Wardlow played for us at East Bay, transferred from Santa Clara. He was a grad transfer, still playing in Australia.
Right.
Not necessarily the most talented guy. Be very talented, but he was a guy that he was so committed on the defensive end, and we really, really fit. So I say that he's the first one to come to mind, but obviously, we could go on for 2 hours and talking about, guys that I've coached. Yeah.
Okay. Toughest guy you've coached against?
Toughest guy I coached against. This one's a little bit of a cheating situation because it was in a camp setting, but it would be Drew Holiday. So very early on, I was coaching this used to be called the Double Pump, like West Coast All-Star Camp. There were 4 NBA guys in that camp. I won't tell you the other 3 because the other 3 didn't play very hard in that camp. Drew Holiday was an absolute menace defensively. He was guarding 94 feet the entire game. So I will always root for that guy, but it was not a lot of fun to coach against him for that 40-minute game.
I love it. All right, give us your NBA or Division I coaching avatar. If I'm describing to someone what Coach Bryan Rooney is like, who's your coaching avatar? Who else is like you?
Oh shoot, I wouldn't be the best person to explain that or shoot avatar where it goes. My wife the other day, and this is the only comparison I will make to him. Okay. Steve Kerr was being interviewed, and I'm getting a few more wrinkles in my forehead. And he said, "Yeah, that kind of looks like you." So not in coaching acumen, but on father time, it is letting us know that he is undefeated with both of our ages.
You're too humble. I think Kerr's a good answer for you. A guy who connects with his players off the court. There's a lot of love. There's a lot of cohesion. I see a lot of similarities. And yeah, a few wrinkles. It's all right. Okay, last one, Coach. Maybe the toughest one. Best restaurant in Hayward.
I'm going to go with La Victoria. It is a Mexican food spot, and it has unbelievable burritos. And so our guys, our assistant coaches do a great job with our pregame meals. But I will tell you, when La Vix is the one, then I know I'm going to be well fed that day.
So that was a self-serving question because I'm going to come watch one of your practices, and then afterwards I got to get some food before I drive home. So that's where I'm going to go.
So lunch is on me.
Okay, beautiful. Coach Rooney, can't thank you enough. As advertised, you're amazing. Could talk to you for a lot longer. Had so many people when I Duffy and I were sharing that we were going to interview you. Had so many people shoot us notes saying you're a legend. Everybody go out and watch Cal State East Bay. They're a great team to watch, and you can tell Coach Rooney's an amazing human. Can't thank you enough, and thanks for listening to the podcast. We appreciate the support.
Absolutely. From episode 1 with Coach Fulton to as long as you guys are on, I will be listening, and honored to be on with you. And we'd love to have you on the game. I love being part of at Dominican and for a short time, kind of part of the kind of Marin basketball culture. And so it's great stuff. There's really good players, more importantly, great people. So thanks again for the time.
Thank you, Dave, for finishing up that interview. Great job, as always. And thank you to Coach Rooney for taking the time in the middle of his early season at a time where he's both getting his team ready and going to practice, putting on a tournament, and also scouting. We heard from him after the fact, Dave, that he'd been at the game between Marin Catholic and De La Salle, and he talked about in an interview how important it is to see players in person when you're scouting them. So that all fits. So very, very generous of him to give us his time. And, we had hoped to get over there in person. Didn't work out, but some other time for sure, Coach Rooney. So, Dave, what we are going to do here in the outro, first time we brought back the outro in a while, is in the intro, you mentioned about stealing little nuggets from this interview and that you'd already stolen quite a few. So we're just going to do a quick, high level, what did we steal from Coach Rooney in this outro?
So many things, but yeah, to narrow it down to a few. And I will say one quick little side note. I'll remind our listeners, if they didn't listen to the first coach roundtable that we did with Tom Poser, Caden Korst, Tony Butler, Dave Deneen. Caden Korst, KK, mentioned that she had reached out to a bunch of college coaches to visit their practices. And several of the coaches said, yes, you can come visit practices. She just said, I'm a high school coach. And she talked about there were some that were really welcoming and some that were kind of went through the motions and just said, sure, you can come, but, didn't really talk to her. The one that she said really stood out to her was Coach Bryan Rooney. She had never met Rooney before. She's a girls' high school coach. He's coaching a men's Division II program. He could not have been more welcoming, invited her in, talked to her, introduced her to the team. Post her visit, she emailed him a few questions, said thank you. He wrote back, thoughtful response, even on a few like actions and drills. So it just shows you he's this really genuine, nice human being who just wants to help people. And he is a listener of our podcast. He likes our podcast, which is amazing. We reached out to him. He got back to us right away. He carved out time right before practice to have this interview with us. So just a really great guy. But anyway, to the things that we're stealing, one of the things that I love that he said, I asked about, I think it was non-negotiables or team rules, whatever. And he said they have one big sign up in their team room. And it's kind of their one real non-negotiable is be a good teammate. And I've said that repeatedly to my team this year that I just love that. It's kind of what can you do for your teammates? That's what I want you thinking about at all times. And what a great message.
Yeah, I think that is obviously something that's easier said than done, from coach to player and even from player to other player. But if it's at the forefront of your mind and you're constantly reminding your players and your players are constantly reminding themselves, take a deep breath. All right, I'm frustrated. I know I just missed a couple shots, but it's not about me, Dave, just like it was never about you with Coach Honeck, and get back to thinking about your teammates. That is a recipe for success. So I love that. And yeah, that is, should be a non-negotiable for every team.
There are these little things that happen in games or obviously practices too, but kids think when it's related to this topic of being selfish. And when coaches will say, you're being selfish, the initial assumption is, oh, I'm shooting too much or I'm a ball hog. But Coach Fulton always talked about this. Like when when we commit a foul 94 feet from the basket because we're being overly aggressive, you're not being a good teammate. Because even if you don't commit the foul or the foul doesn't get called, if you go for a steal 94 feet from the basket and you miss it, now it's a 5-on-4. You're putting your teammates in a bad position. You're being selfish. You're not being a good teammate. So this be a good teammate thing can extend to, pick up after yourself on the bench, give your teammate a ride if they need it. If they're hurt, pat them on the back, all the kind of soft skill stuff. But it also comes down to, in the game, do the right thing for the team. And it's just a really powerful message.
Yep. All right. Well, one that I got, Dave, that I think you may have stolen as well. We talked about, for a while on the podcast, but I'll bring it back, is the concept of looking for transformational rather than transactional players on a team, especially in the NIL environment. And I thought that was just a really great way to frame the current environment, especially at the college level, but it also relates to, lower levels as well, especially in an era where, there are players in 5th or 6th grade that are already playing year-round AAU ball and being encouraged by some coaches or trainers to be transactional, and then they have to come into a different environment where you're really hoping that they'll be transformational, both for themselves but also for the team concept. So that wonderful way to describe that current environment and that challenge. And obviously there's not an easy solution, but being able to describe it is a start.
It's great. Tony Butler mentioned it as well. It's a very powerful, simple concept that really resonated with me as well. So that's a great one. Duff, why don't you do your next one, then I'll finish with mine.
Yeah, I'll shoot 2 free throws here, Dave. I really love the discussion of scouting and the emphasis on us being your own team and what you're going to do, and also the notion of really tailoring, to the extent that you are scouting the opponent, tailoring the scouting to what your individual players might need, or having that in mind, with the idea that maybe player X can only handle 1 or 2 or 3 details, or 1 or 2 or 3 clips on the player they might be guarding, but player Y might want to see all 1,000 clips that you have compiled over the season on the player they're guarding. So really trying to keep in mind what is the best way to impart information to individuals on your team. We know that people learn differently. The more you think about it, and the more you pay attention to it, and the more you ask about it, the more you'll learn the best way to teach individual players on your team. So thought that was great.
It goes back to that concept of fair but not necessarily equal that we've discussed with a number of coaches, Rick Wenner and others. And that was great. Just everybody has their individual way of learning and processing information, and Coach Rooney is highly attuned to that. Related to that, I'm going to do a bonus one. You shot 2 free throws. I'm going to shoot a technical foul here. This isn't my technically my second one, but I liked his story about when he had a meeting scheduled with his athletic director, or his athletic director reached out to him, wanted to meet with him about media or promotion or something. And Coach Rooney said, I can't, I got to meet with a player at that time. And the athletic director was like, well, kind of annoyed. And Coach Rooney's like, these player meetings are very important to me. That's kind of my first priority is being there for my players. So just very much a player's coach.
Yep.
Really awesome. Okay, technically my second one, which is going to lead into a little audio clip that Coach Rooney sent us post-interview, be a hedgehog. Tyler Gaffney actually gave us a heads up that we should ask him about his phrase, be a hedgehog. And shame on me, I forgot to. I was going to do it during crunch time and I forgot. So after the interview, we texted Coach Rooney and said, hey, will you give us your be a hedgehog thing? And he sent us an audio file, which we will put in right after this. But I love this. So just listen to Coach Rooney describe his philosophy of being a hedgehog.
Yes. And someday, Dave, I will tell you my story about George Murzon. You remember him? The Romanian? Yep.
Massive guy.
Yeah. There is a hedgehog story that relates to his anatomy. But that's a story for another day. and probably a little bit more R-rated. So we'll get to this Hedgehog story first. Thanks again to Coach Rooney. It was awesome. We appreciate you, and we look forward to spending some time in person with you sometime soon. Good luck this season with Cal State East Bay.
Sounds great. Here's Coach Rooney talking about being a Hedgehog. Right in our friends Luke Esterkin and Stroke 9 taking us out with Marin County. Keep tuning in to more episodes. We've got some great interviews on the way. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
If they allowed us to keep a pet in our locker room, it would definitely be a hedgehog. It's kind of our unofficial mascot. And it goes back to pretty early on when we took over at East Bay, and we were bringing our first recruiting class and obviously talking to the recruits we had identified that we felt it would be, very, very good fits for us. And then the guys are returning from year 1 to year 2. And we gave them kind of the opposition of the hedgehog versus the fox, and the fox being that animal that's, always looking for an angle and trying to outsmart it and sometimes taking the shortcut. And for us to get the program where we want it to go and the building process, there could not be any shortcuts. And so we kind of juxtapose that to the hedgehog. And the hedgehog is, kind of balls up and just runs over, the obstacle and attacks the challenge. And so we have one of my favorite shirts in my wardrobe is, I think there are only 15 in circulation. That spring, after the season, when we got into our spring workouts, on the court and the weight room and on the track, there were, the guys returning and obviously all the coaches, we got these shirts with a big hedgehog in the middle of it, and we wore them, kind of all around, and as just kind of a great symbol of, let's not be a fox. Let's not try to find, again, that easy way out, but let's attack, the obstacle in front of us, the challenge, and let's attack, success together. So big fan of hedgehogs, and certainly wouldn't want to mess with one. And hopefully our guys will continue to be hedgehogs going forward.
Burke's on his feet. He looks up and gives me a grin and says, "Hey, dude, you too must be from Marin."